Tony's auto repair smelled like oil, money, and bullshit, and I was about to get taken for all three. I stood there with my white cane tapping against the grimy concrete floor, waiting for someone to acknowledge I existed. 3 minutes passed before I heard footsteps shuffling toward me, and even then, the guy sounded like he was doing me a favor. "Yeah, what do you want?" The voice belonged to someone who clearly thought customer service was a foreign concept. "I'm Dave Morrison," I said, extending my hand toward where I figured he was standing. "I called earlier about my truck. It's been making a grinding noise when I brake, and the steering's been pulling to the right." No handshake, just a grunt and the sound of him spitting into what I hoped was a trash can. "Oh yeah, the blind guy. Your truck's out back. Been looking at it this morning." The way he said blind guy made my jaw clench. Not disabled veteran, not even Dave, just the blind guy. But I needed my truck fixed, and Tony's was the only shop within walking distance of my apartment. After losing my sight to an IED blast in Afghanistan 3 years ago, walking distance had become the most important factor in just about every decision I made. "So what's the verdict?" I asked, trying to keep things civil. "Well," Tony said, and I could practically hear the dollar signs ringing in his voice. "You got problems, big problems. That grinding ain't just your brake pads. Your whole brake system's shot. Rotors are warped beyond repair. Calipers are seized. Brake lines are corroded. I'm surprised you made it here alive." My stomach dropped. When you can't see, you develop a sixth sense about people lying to you, and every instinct I had was screaming that this guy was full of shit. But what was I supposed to do? I couldn't exactly pop the hood and take a look myself. "How much are we talking?" I asked. "For parts and labor, you're looking at about $2,800, maybe $3,000 if we find more problems once we get in there." He paused, probably watching my face for a reaction. "Cash only. I don't take credit cards for jobs this big." $3,000, my entire disability check for 2 months. I felt that familiar knot forming in my chest, the same feeling I used to get during rocket attacks in Kandahar, when you knew something was coming, but couldn't do anything to stop it. "That seems high," I said carefully. "Maybe I should get a second opinion." Tony laughed, and it wasn't a friendly sound. "Good luck with that, Chief. You gonna walk to the next shop? It's 8 miles to Peterson's and 12 to Mike's place. Plus, your truck ain't driving anywhere. I already disconnected the brake lines for safety. Can't have you killing yourself or somebody else." The son of a bitch had trapped me, disabled my truck so I couldn't leave, probably knowing I had no way to get to another shop. I stood there feeling smaller than I had since the day I woke up in Landstuhl Medical Center and realized I'd never see another sunrise. "I need some time to think about it," I said. "Time's money, friend. The longer your truck sits here, the more I gotta charge for storage. Tell you what, you seem like a decent guy, so I'll hold off on storage fees until tomorrow morning. After that, it's $20 a day." I wanted to tell him where he could shove his storage fees, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just nodded and started feeling my way toward what I hoped was the exit. "Need help getting out?" Tony called after me, his voice dripping with fake concern. "I'm fine," I lied. The walk home was the longest mile of my life. Every step reminded me how helpless I'd become, how easy it was for people to take advantage of me now. 3 years ago, I was Staff Sergeant Dave Morrison, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. I could tear down a Black Hawk engine blindfolded. Hell, I'd done it plenty of times in sandstorms where you couldn't see your own hands. Now I couldn't even tell if a small-town mechanic was robbing me blind. The irony wasn't lost on me. My apartment was a studio above Mrs. Chen's restaurant, and she must have heard me coming up the stairs because she opened her door before I reached the landing. "Dave, you okay? You sound upset." Mrs. Chen was one of the few people in town who treated me like a human being instead of a tragedy to either pity or avoid. She'd lost her husband in Vietnam and understood something about the weight that service leaves on a person. "Just car trouble," I said, not wanting to burden her with my problems. "Bad car trouble costs money," she said in that direct way of hers. "You need money?" "I'll figure it out," I said, though I had no idea how. That night, I called the VA's Veteran Service line. After 20 minutes on hold and another 10 minutes explaining my situation to someone who sounded like they were reading from a script, I was told that transportation assistance was available but had a 6-month waiting list, and that I should explore community resources in the meantime. Community resources. Right. The same community that crossed the street to avoid making eye contact with the blind veteran. I spent the night lying on my narrow bed, staring at nothing and listening to the sounds of the town settling in around me. Somewhere out there, Tony was probably laughing about the sucker he'd hooked today. $3,000 from a blind veteran who couldn't fight back, couldn't verify the work, couldn't do anything but pay up and shut up. The next morning I walked back to the shop with my checkbook and what was left of my dignity. The plan was simple: get the work done, get my truck back, and never darken Tony's door again. But when I walked in, there were voices I didn't recognize. "You sure this is the place?" The voice was crisp, military, the kind of voice that expected an answer. "GPS says this is it," another voice replied. "Tony's Auto Repair, 412 Industrial Road." The shop went dead silent. Even the compressor stopped humming. I could feel the energy in the room shift like the moment before a firefight. That electric tension when everyone knows something big is about to happen. I heard footsteps approaching, and then someone cleared their throat. "Excuse me, are you Dave Morrison?" "Yeah," I said cautiously. "Who's asking?" "Chief Warrant Officer Jake Martinez, 1st Battalion, 160th SOAR. This is CW2 Sarah Chen and CW3 Mike Thompson. We're Apache pilots out of Fort Campbell. We got a call from someone saying you needed help." The world tilted sideways. 160th SOAR, the Night Stalkers, my old unit. But I didn't know any Apache pilots, and I definitely hadn't called anyone for help. "I think there's been some mistake," I started to say. "No mistake," a familiar voice said from behind me. Mrs. Chen's voice, but not talking to me. "Dave Morrison, Staff Sergeant, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. 3 tours in Afghanistan, lost his sight saving his crew when their bird took an RPG. Now some grease monkey thinks he's an easy mark." Mrs. Chen, Sarah Chen. The pilot had the same last name as my elderly landlord. "Dave," Mrs. Chen said gently, "meet my granddaughter Sarah. I may have mentioned you once or twice." Sarah Chen stepped closer, and I heard the jingle of flight wings on her uniform. "Sergeant Morrison, my grandmother told me what happened. Said some mechanic is trying to scam you for $3,000 on what sounds like a brake job." "It's not that simple," I started to protest, but Jake Martinez cut me off. "Actually, it might be exactly that simple. See, the thing about Apache pilots is we have to know our birds inside and out. And Mike here used to be a crew chief before he got his wings. We know a thing or two about what stuff actually costs." Mike Thompson's voice carried the easy confidence of someone who'd been working on military aircraft for years. "Sergeant, you mind if we take a look at your truck? Professional courtesy?" Before I could answer, Tony's voice boomed from across the shop. "Who the hell are you people, and what are you doing in my shop?" "I'm C-Bar 2 Sarah Chin, United States Army," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made people pay attention. "These are my colleagues. We're here about Sergeant Morrison's vehicle." "Well, you can just turn around and march right back out," Tony snarled. "That truck's been worked on, and the bill's $3,000, cash." "Worked on how?" Mike asked. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Brake system shot. Had to replace everything. Rotors, pads, calipers, lines, master cylinder. Lucky this blind bastard didn't kill someone." The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. When Sarah spoke again, her voice could have frozen hell. "Did you just call this decorated combat veteran a bastard?" "I call him like I see him," Tony replied, apparently too stupid to recognize the danger he was in. "Right," Jake said. "Mike, why don't you and I go take a look at that truck? Sergeant Morrison, you mind if we see what $3,000 bought you?" What happened next was like watching a master class in military precision, except I could only experience it through sound. I heard boots on concrete, the squeak of a hood opening, then a long silence broken only by the occasional or interesting. After about 10 minutes, Mike called out loud enough for the whole shop to hear. "Jake, come look at this." "What's up?" "These brake pads. They're not new." "How not new?" "Well, they've got the original manufacturer's markings, but look at the wear pattern. These pads have been turned. Someone ground them down to make them look fresh." I couldn't help myself. "Mike, let me guess. You're smelling Castrol GTX 10W30, probably 3 months old, mixed with brake dust from what sounds like ceramic pads, not the semi-metallic ones Tony claimed he installed?" Dead silence. Then Mike's voice, full of amazement. "Jesus Christ, Sergeant, how did you—" 15 years working on birds and sandstorms teaches you to use more than your eyes," I said with the first smile I'd cracked in days. "Plus, Tony's cheap. That's definitely Castrol house brand, not the mobile one he's got advertised on his price board. And the rotors? Turned, not replaced. You can see the old scoring marks underneath the fresh machining." My heart started beating faster. I might not be able to see what they were looking at, but I could hear the professional disgust in their voices. Sarah's voice carried clearly across the shop. "What about the brake lines?" "Original equipment, 15 years old if they're a day, but functional. No corrosion, no leaks. The calipers—" There was a pause. "Jesus Christ, Jake, look at this." "What?" "He painted the calipers. Painted them to make them look new. But it's just regular spray paint over the original units." "So what you're telling me," Sarah said, her voice getting louder with each word, "is that this mechanic charged a blind veteran $3,000 for maybe $200 worth of actual work?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Mike replied. The shop went dead quiet. I could hear Tony breathing heavily somewhere behind the counter, probably trying to figure out how to spin this. "Now hold on just a damn minute," he finally blustered. "You people got no right coming in here and—" "We have every right," Jake interrupted. "This is a United States Army veteran, and you just committed fraud against him. That makes it our business." "Fraud?" Tony's voice went up an octave. "I never committed no fraud. I did the work, just like I said." "You did some work," Sarah corrected. "About 6% of what you charged for. That's called theft by deception in most states. In Kentucky, it's a felony if it's over $500. I heard papers rustling, then Jake's voice. "Sergeant Morrison, did you pay this bill yet?" I was about to, I admitted. Good thing we got here first. Tony, we're going to need to see your invoices for the parts you claim to install on this truck. I don't have to show you shit, Tony snarled. No, you don't, Sarah agreed, but the Kentucky State Police probably will want to see them, along with the Better Business Bureau, the Attorney General's office, and whoever handles business licensing in this county. You can't prove nothing, Tony said, but his voice was shaking now. Actually, we can, Mike said. See, the Army taught us to document everything. Jake, you getting this on video? Every word, Jake confirmed. Might make an interesting case study back at Rucker. How to spot a scammer. Signs your local mechanic is ripping off veterans. I heard more footsteps, then Sarah's voice close to my ear. Sergeant, we're going to get your truck road ready and get you out of here. This guy's done. But the bill? What bill? She asked loudly. The bill for work that wasn't done, for parts that weren't installed? That bill? Now wait just a goddamn minute. Tony's voice was desperate now. I spent all morning on that truck. I gotta get paid for my time. Your time? Mike's laugh was sharp as a blade. Your time spray painting calipers and trying to scam a blind veteran? How much do you think that time is worth? I got overhead. I got expenses. You got a problem, Jake said flatly. And it's about to get bigger. I heard someone dialing a phone, then Sarah's professional voice. Yes, I'd like to report a case of fraud against a disabled veteran. The suspect is currently attempting to extort $3,000 for services not rendered. Hang up that phone, Tony yelled. Or what? Sarah asked calmly. You'll call the police? Please do. I'm sure they'd love to hear about this. The next hour passed in a blur of activity that I could only follow through sound and touch. Jake and Mike worked on my truck. Actually, worked on it, replacing the brake pads that needed replacing, checking the fluid levels, making sure everything was safe and functional. Sarah stayed close to me, explaining what was happening and making sure I understood that I wasn't paying Tony a damn dime. Right. The actual work your truck needed was about $180 in parts and maybe 2 hours of labor, she told me. Standard shop rate around here is about $60 an hour, so you're looking at maybe $300 total. And that's if you were paying full retail, which you shouldn't be. But he said he lied, Sergeant. He saw a blind veteran and thought he'd hit the jackpot. Happens more often than you'd think. A new voice joined the conversation, older, official sounding. I'm Deputy Martinez with the County Sheriff's Office. Got a call about a fraud case? That would be us, Sarah said. This gentleman here is Staff Sergeant Dave Morrison, United States Army, retired. The proprietor of this establishment attempted to defraud him of approximately $2,700 by claiming to perform services that were never rendered and install parts that were never installed. That's a serious accusation, the deputy said. Yes, sir, it is. We have video documentation of the fraudulent work, witness statements, and the victim is right here if you'd like to take his statement. I heard Tony trying to interrupt, his voice high and panicked. Officer, these people are harassing me. They got no right to be in my shop. They're interfering with my business. Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down and let me sort this out, the deputy said firmly. What followed was the most satisfying conversation I'd heard in years. Mike walked the deputy through the evidence, explaining in clear professional terms exactly what Tony had done and how much money he'd tried to steal. Sarah provided the legal framework, citing specific statutes and explaining why this constituted felony fraud. Jake kept filming everything, making sure there was a record of every lie Tony tried to tell. So let me get this straight, the deputy finally said. Mr. Morrison, You brought your truck here for brake work, and Mr. Tony here quoted you $3,000? That's right, I said. And Tony, you're claiming you replaced the entire brake system? I did the work, Tony insisted. Just 'cause they don't like my prices, don't make it fraud. But you didn't replace the brake system, the deputy said. According to these folks, you just made the old parts look new and tried to charge for parts you never installed. They don't know what they're talking about. Sir, these are Army helicopter mechanics and pilots. I'm pretty sure they know the difference between new parts and old parts. The silence stretched out until I thought Tony might actually have fled. Then I heard him clear his throat. Look, maybe I made a mistake on the estimate. Maybe the truck didn't need as much work as I thought. We can work something out. What kind of something? The deputy asked. I'll cut the bill in half. $1,500. That's fair. For work you didn't do? Sarah's voice could have cut glass. I did work. I checked everything. You spray-painted the calipers and turned the rotors, Mike interrupted. That's maybe $50 worth of work, and you did it badly. Another long silence. Then Tony played his last card. Fine. Just pay me for my time. 2 hours at my shop rate. $120 total. Counteroffer, Jake said. You pay Sergeant Morrison $50 for wasting his time and trying to scam him, and we don't press charges. I ain't paying him nothing. Then we press charges, Sarah said simply. Deputy, what's the penalty for felony fraud in Kentucky? Class D felony carries 1 to 5 years in prison and up to $10,000 in fines, the deputy replied, plus restitution to the victim. Tony went quiet again. When he finally spoke, his voice was small and defeated. What if I just waive the bill? No charge for anything. We call it even. Not even close to even, I said, speaking up for the first time in a while. You tried to steal $3,000 from me. You trapped me here by disabling my truck. You called me a blind bastard. Even isn't on the table. What do you want? Tony asked. I want you to pay for the actual work that needs to be done on my truck, I said, and I want you to apologize. A real apology, not some half-assed, sorry you got offended bullshit. And, Sarah added, we want you to put a sign in your window stating that you offer a 20% military discount and that you guarantee fair treatment for all disabled veterans. And, Mike chimed in, we want the contact information for every veteran you've worked on in the past year. We're going to check your work. Tony was beaten, and he knew it. Fine, whatever. I'll pay for the work. I'll put up the sign. I'll give you the information. And the apology? I pressed. A long pause. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I'm sorry. I was wrong to try to take advantage of you. I'm sorry I called you names. You served your country, and you deserved better. It wasn't much, but it was something. More importantly, it was witnessed by a sheriff's deputy and recorded on video. The actual repair took Jake and Mike about another hour. They replaced the brake pads that actually needed replacing, topped off the brake fluid, and checked the entire system. When they were done, they handed me a receipt for $127.50, parts and tax, no labor charge. Professional courtesy, Mike explained. We take care of our own. But they weren't done. As I was getting ready to leave, Sarah handed me a business card. That's got my personal cell number on it. You have any problems with anyone trying to take advantage of you? Mechanic, contractor, landlord, anyone, you call me. We've got a network of night stalkers all over the country, and we look out for each other. Why? I asked. You don't even know me. Sergeant, you were 160th. That makes you family. And family doesn't let family get screwed over by some small-town con artist. As we prepared to leave, the deputy pulled me aside. "Mr. Morrison, I want you to know that we're going to be keeping an eye on this place. Tony's going to be on a very short leash from now on, and if you ever have problems with anyone else in this county taking advantage of your disability, you call me directly." He pressed a card into my hand. "That's got my personal number. Any veteran gets mistreated in my jurisdiction, I want to know about it." The drive home was surreal. My truck ran perfectly, better than it had in months. The radio worked, the air conditioning was blowing cold, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some control over my life again. But the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. 2 days later, I got a call from Sarah. "Sergeant, you need to turn on Channel 8 News, right now." I fumbled for my talking remote control and managed to find the local news station. The anchor was just starting a story. "Tonight at 6, an investigation into auto repair fraud targeting veterans. How one local mechanic's attempt to overcharge a disabled veteran led to a military investigation that's now gone statewide." The report was devastating. It turned out that once Mike, Jake, and Sarah started digging, they found that Tony had been systematically overcharging veterans for years. They'd contacted every veteran on his customer list, more than 40 people, and found a pattern of inflated bills, unnecessary work, and outright fraud. The story featured interviews with 3 other veterans who'd been scammed, including a Vietnam vet who'd paid $1,800 for a transmission service that was never performed, and a Gulf War veteran who'd been charged $1,200 for new shocks that turned out to be the original shocks painted black. But the real kicker came at the end of the story. The reporter announced that the Kentucky Attorney General had opened a formal investigation into Tony's business practices, and that a group of veteran advocacy organizations had filed a class action lawsuit seeking full restitution for all affected veterans. The next morning, I walked down to Mrs. Chen's restaurant for breakfast, and the entire place erupted in applause when I walked in. Every table was full, and it seemed like half the town was there. "Dave," Mrs. Chen called out, "you're famous. Come, sit. Breakfast is free for heroes." I tried to protest that I wasn't a hero, that I'd just been trying to get my truck fixed, but nobody wanted to hear it. People kept coming up to my table to shake my hand and thank me for standing up to that crook Tony. One conversation stuck with me. An elderly man introduced himself as Robert Chen, Mrs. Chen's brother-in-law and a Korean War veteran. "Son," he said, "you did something important here. That bastard's been ripping off people in this town for years, but nobody wanted to make a fuss. You made a fuss. Good for you." "I didn't make a fuss," I protested. "I just got lucky that Sarah showed up." "Luck nothing," he replied. "You stood your ground when he tried to push you around. That takes guts, especially when you can't see what's coming at you." Over the next few weeks, the story kept growing. The Attorney General's investigation expanded to include several other auto repair shops across the state. The class action lawsuit gained momentum, eventually representing more than 200 veterans who'd been overcharged or defrauded by dishonest mechanics. Tony's shop closed down 3 weeks after our confrontation. The building sat empty for a month before a sign went up: Morrison Automotive, honest service for veterans and families. I thought it was a coincidence until Jake called me. "Surprise, Sergeant. Remember how you said you used to be able to tear down a Black Hawk engine blindfolded? Well, turns out there's not much difference between aircraft engines and car engines. The tools are different, but the principles are the same." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you've got about a dozen Night Stalkers who've been pooling their money to set you up in business. We bought Tony's old shop. We're getting it equipped with all the adaptive tools you'll need, and we've already got 3 disabled veterans lined up to work with you." I was speechless. Literally couldn't form words. Sarah's voice came on the line. Apparently, I was on speakerphone. "Dave, you know how many disabled veterans get screwed over by mechanics every year? How many people take advantage of disabilities to overcharge or provide substandard service? It's a huge problem, and you're uniquely qualified to solve it." "But I can't see—" "So what?" Mike interrupted. "You can feel when an engine's running rough. You can hear when a bearing's going bad. You can smell when brake pads are overheated or when there's an oil leak. You've got skills that most sighted mechanics wish they had. Plus," Jake added, "you'll have help. We've got Tommy Rodriguez, lost his leg in Iraq, but he's a hell of a diagnostic tech. Maria Santos, Army mechanic, lost partial use of her left arm, but she can rebuild a transmission faster than anyone I know. And Dave Patterson, Navy, lost hearing in one ear, but he's a genius with electrical systems. It's a full-service shop run by disabled veterans, for veterans and their families," Sarah explained. "Honest pricing, quality work, and nobody gets taken advantage of. We're calling it Morrison Automotive, but if you want to change the name—" "No," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Morrison Automotive sounds perfect." The grand opening was 3 months later, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. The parking lot was full of military vehicles, everything from current-duty soldiers' personal cars to vintage Vietnam-era motorcycles owned by veteran bikers. The local VFW post set up a food truck, and someone organized a live band made up entirely of veteran musicians. But the best part was when Mrs. Chen grabbed the microphone during the opening ceremony. "This is my grandson Dave," she announced to the crowd, even though I wasn't actually her grandson. 3 months ago, he was just trying to get his truck fixed. Today, he's opening a business that's going to make sure no veteran ever gets cheated again. That's what Americans do. We turn problems into solutions." The applause was thunderous. I stood there with my hand on the ribbon we were about to cut, surrounded by people who'd gone from strangers to family in the span of a few months, and realized that getting scammed by Tony was the best thing that had ever happened to me. Not because of the money, though the class action lawsuit eventually resulted in Tony paying out over $40,000 in restitution to the veterans he'd cheated. Not because of the business, though Morrison Automotive became profitable within 6 months and now employs 8 disabled veterans full-time. It was because it reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were people who had my back, people who wouldn't let me get pushed around or taken advantage of, that being blind didn't make me helpless, and that my military training and experience still had value. 2 years later, Morrison Automotive has become the go-to shop for veterans throughout central Kentucky. We've got a 20% military discount, a no-bullshit guarantee on all our work, and a reputation for treating people fairly regardless of their disability status. We've also become a training center, teaching other disabled veterans the skills they need to work in automotive repair. But the thing I'm most proud of is the ritual that starts every morning at Morrison Automotive. I unlock the front door, flip the sign from closed to open, and walk straight to the waiting room. There, hanging right next to the coffee machine where every customer has to see it, is a simple wooden plaque with burned-in letters. I run my fingers over those letters slowly, feeling each ridge and groove Sarah carved by hand. We take care of our own. The wood is smooth now from 2 years of my daily touch, but the message is as sharp as ever. Sarah made it for me in her wood shop. and she delivered it personally on our first anniversary. "Just wanted to make sure you remember," she said as she hung it on the wall. "Remember what? That you're not just fixing cars here. You're fixing the idea that disabled veterans are easy targets. Every honest bill you write, every fair price you charge, every time you treat a customer with respect, you're proving that we take care of our own." She was right. Every morning, when I trace those letters with my fingertips, I remember that this isn't just a business. It's a statement. It says that veterans don't abandon each other, that disabilities don't define limitations, and that sometimes the best way to fight back against injustice is to build something better. Last week, an elderly Korean War vet brought his grandson in for his first oil change. The kid was nervous, asking a dozen questions about every little thing. When they were ready to leave, I heard the old man whisper to his grandson, "See that sign, boy? That's what real men do. They take care of their own." The kid's voice was small but clear. "Will you teach me how to take care of people too, Grandpa?" "Already am, son." "Already am." Tony's shop is still empty, with weeds growing through the cracks in the parking lot. Every time I drive past it, I think about the scared, helpless feeling I had that day when he tried to scam me out of $3,000. Then I think about the workshop full of disabled veterans who now have good jobs, the hundreds of customers who know they'll get honest service at Morrison Automotive, and the network of Night Stalkers who still check in on me regularly to make sure I'm doing okay. Sometimes getting knocked down is the first step to standing up taller than you ever thought possible. And sometimes the best revenge against someone who tried to take advantage of you is to make sure it never happens to anyone else. We take care of our own. It's not just a sign on the wall. It's a promise. And it's a promise we keep, one honest repair at a time,